Greetings to all you viewers out there. Welcome to Sustainable Development Chats, that's SDCs with friends, a forum where we just sit back, we chill, and we talk about heavy topics like global events and great new fields in work and academia, and how they impact on sustainable development in developing countries, particularly in so-called small island developing states. And my guest today, this is Mr. Andrei Polejack, a valued friend and colleague, who's going to talk to us today, December 22, 2020, about science diplomacy. So before we launch into that, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background in science, and how you came to be dealing with this topic.
Sure. Hi, ALEEZA. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'd like to start things by first congratulating you and thank you for this invitation. And second, by saying that I find this idea really awesome. I think that we should gather people around to talk about, the things that we usually deal with and never talk about. We just take for granted, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's really, really interesting. Thank you. So, okay, a little bit about myself. Andrei Polejack, Brazilian, as you might have noticed by my strong accent. I speak Portuguese, by the way, not Spanish. I've been dealing with marine and Antarctic sciences from the Ministry of Science and Technology in Brazil for the past 20 years. So while as a general coordinator for that, I chaired a lot of events. I represented Brazil in many international fora, UN level, multilateral, bilateral, and also tried to organize the mass that we had in the country for the marine sciences sector and try to fundraise, those kind of things. So I was more a bureaucrat as a science manager for the ocean and Antarctica. And then 2 years ago, I decided that I wasn't getting any younger. My hair was not growing back. So it was a good time to stop and do finally a PhD. And then this opportunity came here in Sweden in an UN level university, the World Maritime University, that just 2 years ago as well, just created and established a new institute. It's the Global Ocean Institute. Of course, I decided to take this PhD journey in science diplomacy, as you said. So it's a thing which is very much dear to my heart.
Because I'd really like to hear a lot about this. By the way, I forgot to ask you, what drink are you bringing to the table this afternoon?
Okay, so I'm in Sweden, and I could come with aquavit, which is a liquor that they produce here, but I find that way too strong. So I'm coming with a Swedish beer because after all, I'm into the Vikings world and Vikings drink beer. So this is a Swedish beer, Skål.
Okay. Well, I'm in Barbados and it's Christmas time. So I have our local, also regional Caribbean or English speaking Caribbean drink that we drink at this time of the year called sorrel. No, it's not the green vegetable sorrel. It's really actually bright red. I don't know if you can see that in this green glass. Okay, cool. Some people put some rum in it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would put some rum in it.
I always leave that out. I always leave that out, though. I take it without. So, yeah. So tell us a little bit about this science diplomacy. I say science diplomacy. What exactly are we referring to?
All right. So I'll explain to you the way I see it, because even in the academia, there isn't a final definition of what science diplomacy is. But it's really good because I've seen policy statements all around the globe saying how important science diplomacy is for building communities and finding strengths between countries, especially when you think about global challenges such as climate change and ocean related subjects. So you see a lot of statements coming out with those terms, science diplomacy, but not I believe that not even the people that stayed there, they're really clear on what science diplomacy is. So, okay, science diplomacy is when you combine research with international relations and all the mixtures that that can have. So, for instance, something that everybody is very aware of, the World Health Organization issued some recommendations based on the best scientific knowledge that we have until today about COVID-19, right? So that was a multiplicity of researchers working together, independent of their nations, producing the best knowledge that they could as fast as they could. And we are living this pandemic, but that's one way of looking at science diplomacy. Another way of looking at science diplomacy is, despite all the recommendations that came from the World Health Organization, countries adopted completely different measures. So that is also science diplomacy. So you can see the benefit, but also the downfall of that. You can see that many countries are actually brought together because of research projects, joint research projects. One very classic example of science diplomacy is the CERN, that the accelerator of particles that they have in Switzerland. So that project, it's a big project, very expensive, and it had to be done together by several nations. Among those nations, we were talking about having Americans and Russians together just after the Cold War. So we were talking about nations that were having geopolitical conflicts, but had to come together to develop the best science or the most updated science. So that is also science diplomacy, when you bridge the countries through research. And you have several examples of that. So why I decided to do that? Because first, as a government official, I've seen multiple times science diplomacy being stated as a value, as a strength that should be explored. But I didn't see, however, how it could be employed. And second, I look at the ocean and the challenges that we face today to overcome the loss of biodiversity, the climate change impacts on the ocean, and overexploitation of natural resources. So I look at that and I see that most of the ocean actually falls out of national jurisdictions. So, okay, by the law of the sea, you understand that the seabed, soil, subsoil, those are common heritage of mankind, of humankind. But what about the water, the high seas, that are now under the scrutiny of a new treaty? So that for me is a classic, perfect example of science diplomacy, because for us to understand what is there, what we need to better manage, and what are the possible solutions that we have in our hands today to do best for our ocean, we need scientific advice. We need to foster research, and we need to give up conflicts that we have in other fields and work together as nations, and more than nations, peoples, to try to understand what we can do better for a better management of the ocean. So that's why I decided to do my PhD on this field. I can't lie that there are some times during the night and special, which I wake up and say, oh my God, what am I doing? But now I am truly one of those people that think that science diplomacy can actually help if understood well.
I'm wondering if it also applies to advocating in the area of transfer of technology, in terms of diplomats actually advocating for scientific advancements from more developed states. Is that also a form of science diplomacy?
Absolutely. And it's very interesting that you asked me just this now, because I have been exploring this new concept of science colonialism that we see. And,
yeah.
and it happens because I just came about the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission from UNESCO just released like this week or last week a document which is called the Global Ocean Science Report, which is a report of the scientific status for ocean science around the world. And the pictures in there, the data that you find in there, it's just, oh my God, it's like that's despair, you know, because when you look at the global south and you look the capacities that we have, and I mean Caribbean, South America, Latin America, Africa, Asia, you know, all of us, we are in a situation that we don't have enough technology. We don't have enough research vessels. We don't have enough people. We don't have people trained, and we don't have the basic materials to, you know, progress and develop our own technology. So it's not a competition. We can't compete in that regard. But we are sitting and facing oceans and areas of the ocean which are undersampled and undermapped and are very important for us to understand global processes like global ocean circulation or biodiversity or where are the fishes. So we need to understand that. And they, I mean, the global north, the detentors of the technology and the capacities, they want to access that. So there is a win-win situation that science diplomacy can help building that dialogue that should be fair, that should be just, in a way that everybody benefits from that. But you know what happened during this COVID pandemic? It's awful. Because of the travel bans, many of the global north researchers were prevented from traveling to their field work in the global south. So because they didn't have anybody in the field well trained and the technology and the research platforms weren't there, entire research projects were jeopardized because of the lack of, you know, the principal investigators that were in the global north and couldn't fly because of the COVID pandemic. So the question that rises today is, why does this still happen? Why aren't we training people in the field? Why aren't those technologies being left behind? You know, the funding is coming from the more developed countries, so they acquire the technology, they apply the technology in our waters or in front of our countries, but we never get to get that kind of technology in the house. So we need to discuss that with more, you know, critical view, so we can actually look at the world as one big round thing floating around.
Well, here's the thing. Do you think that even that through science diplomacy, do you think through our advocating that we are that we're specific enough about what we need in terms of capacity building? We had a regional meeting in Mexico 2015. I'd done a presentation on sustainable development. And the problem that we have with sustainable development is how we kind of keep addressing one part. So we might train somebody in this area, but we don't necessarily at the same time acquire the equipment. And then in another area, we might get equipment, but it has to be done in a very measured and a very planned way, so that you don't get the expertise and then have no framework for that expertise to be applied. Otherwise, you end up with brain drain. They'll go somewhere else to work, you know? You don't have the equipment and then nobody to work it. And then you need your maintenance plans, because one of the big fall downs is when your equipment malfunctions and you can't afford the part or whatever it is, it sits down and it dies. And then underpinning all of that are funds. You need money to create those institutions, to create those posts. And I think you need to do that in specific areas. You can't just do it for a particular nation. It has to be a specific area, several plans for specific areas after assessments have been done about what the needs are. And then I'm just thinking, if you know exactly what it is you need and you can push that, would that not help would that not make the diplomacy more effective?
Yeah, ALEEZA, I love you for that. It's exactly what we're thinking now, because the first step is actually that countries, not exactly countries, but the ocean communities within the countries, they need to access what they have and what they need. And it seems pretty simple, but it's not. It's not simple. And many, and I include Brazil in that, we are not very sure what we need because we don't know what's out there. So we don't even see the full potential that we can leverage from certain technologies. So one specific disclaimer that I wanted to make now is that I'm coming from a side that just assumes that science today is deemed necessary for overcoming sustainable challenges to become sustainable. So I am one of those that advocates that without science, there is no way that we're going to be sustainable whatsoever.
And I'm going to add that I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, there are some that advocate on the contrary, but if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and the whole 2030 agenda, most of the goals, most of the targets within goals are science-based. Why they are there? Because a scientist or a group of scientists discovered that that problem was occurring and what was the root cause of that problem, or at least some kind of data that could show why that is happening. So science is, since the start, showing us what's going on. And a classic example is the IPCC in the climate. IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. It is an independent body of scientists that just gather and analyze the data, the available data about the climate, and then inform. And it is not an official information, but it does inform the convention, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. That makes diplomacy
take action. Like, for instance, the Paris Agreement that determined that we should not get into above 2 degrees Celsius of heat. So in that case, you can clearly see that science is giving us, providing the information that they need. Okay, if you look at the IPCC panel, if you look at an ocean example, which is the Global Ocean Assessment, which is a very comprehensive assessment on the status of the ocean environment around the world. It has like almost 1,000 pages of report, and it's showing clear gaps that we have of knowledge and what we need. So everything is there, not everything, but it has a very good comprehensive scene picture of what's going on. So if you take that and you take the IPCC and you check who are the authors of that, who are the guys that actually provided the data and wrote those reports. And I'm telling you, I'm doing it right now for a paper I'm trying to write. 20% of those are from Latin America and the Caribbean.
Yeah.
20%.
Well, can I say, right? I hope I didn't cut you off there. But again, I'm going back to conferences. The 2017 World Ocean Conference that we attended, there was a term that was used there that I really hoped would stick after the conference, but it didn't. Instead of saying small island developing states, we'd say large ocean states.
I love it.
I loved it so much, but it didn't seem to stick. And I feel like now is the time that we need to really strike the iron, because this is a very pivotal time globally, regionally, and nationally. And this is a time where some of us have our continental shelf recommendations. This is a time that, we're conscious of blue economy and green economy. And I feel like it would be a travesty if Latin America and the Caribbean, with all that we have in those areas, all the natural resources, if we were not to become leading, that we were not to become leaders in in spearheading the progress of those areas, green energy, blue energy, development of the blue economy, as well as the green economy. I'm very well aware that that small island part is what hinders us now, the lack of capacity. And this is why I feel like we have to get these plans going. We need to focus on what it is that has to be done. And this is why I'm so thrilled by your science diplomacy. And then we have to focus on how we're going to get it, whether, and I'm certain it's going to lead through cooperation and diplomacy.
So yeah, I love the term. And I think that blue economy, actually, I don't know if you know that, ALEEZA, but it was because of the SDCs, it was because of the large ocean states that we have a sustainable development goal dedicated to the ocean. If it wasn't because of the islands, SDG 14 would never have existed. So it is a prerogative, it is a leadership of the islands to think about ocean economy, because the ocean represents so much into your values, not just economical, but social values, that it is the soul of many islands. And that soul is not even being well comprehended. And we need to start looking at it in a different perspective. So there is a good opportunity now, together with all the things that you just enlightened, and I agree fully with them, is the upcoming decade, UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. It starts next year, 2021. And everybody's very hopeful that this decade will actually make a change. We have 10 years to raise our flags and go fight for funding, go fight for equity, for justice. And that's the voice that I want to hear from the global south, that we need to have fair and just transitions, that we need to get all the mechanisms that diplomacy has already agreed upon. It's in the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, the transfer of marine technology.
Absolutely.
And that's not happening. We need to do that, capacity building and transfer of marine technology.
Exactly. Is there any particular, in your paper, is there any particular focus in terms of science diplomacy that you're taking on, or are you exploring the different facets?
Well, officially, yeah, I'm looking at the Atlantic, because we, Brazil, South Africa, and the European Union, we signed a statement called the Belém Statement in 2017, that it was grounded on science diplomacy. It is to foster research and to align research from pole to pole. And it looked to me as a wonderful opportunity, because it's working. I see concrete examples coming out of it, projects being funded, actions being proposed, and people, just bridging people and communities into something that I think that we need also to talk to the listeners about: ocean literacy, which is something amazing, amazing. Ocean literacy stands for the impacts that for you to understand the impacts that you have on the ocean, but at the same time understand the impacts that the ocean has on you. So with that kind of connection that we have, it's much easier on islands. If you look at Brazil, man, I live in a town in Brazil which is more than 1,000 kilometers away from the ocean. So it's really hard for people, my peers in my town, connect to ocean affairs except for leisure. They don't know that 90% of their trade comes from the ocean. They don't know that the ocean plays a major role in maintaining Earth in the temperature that it is, or even the exchange of salt and heat in between the waters. So they don't get it, and I understand why. But they do like to take their beer to the beach every holiday and show them to the kids, and have a good fish on their plate and eat shrimps. That's what they want, right? Or go to the Caribbean with the beautiful beach, enjoy the sun, listen to good music, have a good drink as you have. Those kind of things are ocean literacy. Why are we not educating the children about how we could be impactful and how the ocean can be impactful on us? So that's very exciting. I love the term. So I decided to go through with the Atlantic as my case study.
and looking at the UN decade of ocean science. I really, really want to propose something, a mechanism or a framework, if you may, at the end of my PhD, that we could use science diplomacy as a tool, you know, to have those fair and just transitions that I just spoke about. But on the side, because of the lack of literature and the lack of studies on several topics, I'm doing research on pollution in the marine environment and the gaps we have on knowledge and technology in the South. I'm working with a very good friend of mine, also Brazilian, Luciana. She's doing PhD here with me, and we are working now on ocean justice, blue justice,
I like that.
and science colonialism, because we need to raise that discussion in a way that diplomacy, you got to remember something about, we say diplomacy, we say science, but it's all based on people. And that people, those guys, they really struggle, because if you look at your mission at the UN, the Barbados mission at the UN, the same guy that will fight for any ocean affair or any ocean interest that Barbados has is the same guy that probably will fight about the COVID pandemic, human rights, you know, the celebration day of the Sputnik, all those things. Those diplomats are just crazy. We don't have enough people. Not even the Brazilian mission has a lot of guys there. So those guys, they need to be generalists. They can't understand about everything. So what they need is a strong basis at the capital. So if the capital is able to provide them with a position, provide them with information which they find reliable and trustworthy, then they will be able to do their jobs better. So how does the capital produce that knowledge? It has to spread out and gain knowledge that comes from science, from social communities, from industry, you know, all the stakeholders involved, and many times in the government, and I am one of those guys. It's really hard for you to spread and get all the information in a timely manner. And you can't have like seminars and webinars all the time. You need to have quick access to information. Where is that information? We usually don't have a good database for that. We don't have where to pick that information from. You just know someone that read someone something. And that's not good enough. When you look at more developed countries, let's take for instance the UK. The UK has a science attaché sitting in the Brazilian embassy, in the embassy in Brasilia. So that guy is responsible for both promoting UK research centers and university to the Brazilian population, but at the same time gathering all the information that is being developed in Brazil and going back to the UK. So they know things that many of us don't know, because they have one guy, only one guy to do that. So we're now thinking about it. So it's a double coin, if that terms exist in English. So it's the double side of the coin. In one side, you have diplomats that need to be better informed. And on the other side, you need that information to come to the policy network so they can inform the diplomats, right? So that coin needs to be fostered in both ways. You need to have a good grounded basis of information to access, and then translating that information all the way to diplomacy. In that regard, all of our countries would be so much powerful when negotiating our interests, you know? So I'm trying to look at all these things and my mind going nuts all about it, and trying to see if there is a way of developing a framework in which could be applied and adapted to different realities in the global South. So we could, you know, do, if you take step 1, 2, and 3, and 4, you can be, you know, build a stronger science diplomacy.
Honestly, Andre, you said so much. I can see how your mind is swirling around with that. You said so much. There was so much there to unpack, but I love that you said it, because first of all, like when you started with education, well, you were actually speaking about what we were speaking about a moment before, when you talked about one guy doing everything. You know, I was in the government too. One person covers a multiplicity of areas. And it's hard to focus or pin down any one area and know it well and work and work as efficiently with it as you could. And that goes back to the same capacity deficiencies, because like in the presentation that I mentioned that I've done, that was another arm, data collection and data and data maintenance. Lots of the times they're just not information. There's nobody there to take the information. And another one of my, I don't want to say pet peeves, but an area that I really feel strongly about is education. You just put a word on it. You just put a term on it, ocean literacy. Because I had even spoken to some people, I feel as though, especially in the Caribbean region, the island, that we should be teaching, and now that you've given me this new phrase, I'm just going to be using it like I had it in my vocabulary forever. We should be teaching ocean literacy from the kindergarten. It should be a part of our thinking. It should be a way of life. We should understand all the resources we have around us and the need to not only use them, but to preserve them. It should be, yes, we get taught in chemistry, biology, and sciences in general, but I felt like we need a specific focus on oceans. And if you start teaching that from really young, to suit each age group, you would have so many people versed in it. And then as we go along, as we are using science diplomacy, once we've got our plans for capacity building, we have good people with a foundation for ocean literacy who can take it in so many different directions when they get to the tertiary level. And hopefully we'll build resources that we'll be able to employ them to continue that oceans diplomacy, as well as to implement scientific or anthropological or whatever it may be aspects of oceans, environmental, all of the areas that oceans can lead us into. And I feel as though certainly in my neck of the woods, my side of the world, where a lot of people still think doctor, lawyer, accountant is it, and like nobody's making money from that anymore because there's many of us. We really need to think in terms of large ocean states, and that our resources and our income, there's a wealth of income out there in the ocean, so we can use that, and we can also, but we also have to balance that with preserving it, So,
absolutely. You're going to be happy to know that there's plenty of material. The group that's working on ocean literacy for the decade is really strong. And many people are very motivated, for change. And it's beautiful to see. There, in that specific group, I see a true cooperation going on. I don't know why. It's just my gut, my feeling. But they have produced from school material that can be used from 3 years old until teenagers, just together with all the subjects that they go through school. They have developed ocean literacy through arts, through writing, literature. It's amazing, And now they're developing the kind of ocean literacy that needs to be developed to the policy making.
Yeah.
Because if you know what, it took us, Brazil is a huge country and we have a huge coastline. So everybody just assumed that we know things, but it's not true. We're in the same situation as pretty much everybody else. Right. Like 2 years ago, one PhD finally figured out how much of our economy is impacted by the ocean. We didn't know. And we still don't know. There are no official numbers for that. But right. What we think is around 19% of our gross domestic products, which means that our biggest commodity, which is agriculture, right? It's 24%. So ocean is pretty big and it doesn't show up. When you look at our GDP, nobody sees the ocean there. It's not there. But it's 19%, man. It's a lot of money. Around the world, I heard someone saying that the ocean business in 2018, I'm not sure, I need to check on that, but it was around 30 trillion US dollars in ocean
Sorry,
business.
it was how much?
30 trillion US dollars.
Oh. Wow.
Only ocean business. So why aren't we surfing that wave?
Yeah. And that's exactly it.
How important it is for the livelihoods of everybody living by the coasts, and more people are going to the coast each year. How important it is to have a healthy ocean.
Yeah.
So if that single message comes through generations, and then I think that we would be doing something different, because we're not doing good now. It's not good. We need to change. We need to change.
And then also diversify, because I think one of the things that COVID has taught us is, because a lot of us, our major oceans reliant is tourism, and drawing people because of attractive beaches. But when the people can't come to you, then no, you have a problem. So again, and like I feel, like I said, I agree with you. I feel like science, we have to really dig into the science of all kinds of things. I think science is going to underpin all the green economy, obviously the blue, and these are areas where we have lots of resources. So we just really need to build the capacity to develop them, to develop infrastructure, to develop people in these areas, and to make the absolute most of it and become leaders in these areas.
I love the idea.
So thank you so much, Andrei, for being here. This was fun. I love talking to you about this topic. I love learning about this topic from you. And I hope that we can do it again, either on this or another topic.
Oh, ALEEZA, thank you. I miss you so much, and I miss having these conversations with you. I'm happy that Zoom allows us to get closer. But actually, when we have the chance to sit down and just spend hours and hours talking about our own passions about the ocean, I'm always in love with that. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for giving your time, and have a great Christmas, and all the best to you and your family.
Thank you, dear. You stay well, stay safe, huh?
Thank you. I will.
Love you.
Love you too.
Bye.